It's been a very long time since I have filmed a YouTube video. So today I'm gonna do my reading wrap up for like the last couple of months because I have not filmed one of these since like mid of last year, like November, July, I don't even know. So let's do it. The first book that I want to talk about is The Song of Achilles. So I did tap this book. You can kind of see my tabbing sections were sad, writing, romance, and shocked, and it's all in blue and gold. I read this book all the way back in August. It's been a long time. I gave it a 4.0. Nothing more, nothing less. A 4.0. It was not a bad book at all, I will say, but will I ever read it again? No. Like maybe certain parts, but not ever again. Like everyone was like, this book made me cry, this book is such good gay representation. I didn't really agree. The writing was pretty, but I think it's just like not really my style. I think what mostly pissed me off is that like there's a lot of cheating in this book. And it just wasn't cutesy, haha. I feel like it was very glossed over. Like yeah. Anyway, honestly that's really all I have to say about this. I feel like there's not really more, but yeah, Song of Achilles. I know this is definitely some people's cup of tea, and I'm not saying it's a bad book at all. If you want to read like a LGBTQ plus romance, gay romance, as well as like Greek mythology-esque vibes, like this is 100% your go-to book. So I get why people like it. It wasn't my favorite personally. The second book that I want to talk about is called The Phantom Prince. So I do not have a physical copy of this book anymore because I gave it to a friend because it was more of like a one-time read and I'll never read it again and I don't want it on my bookshelf. I'll plop it here. But yeah, The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. We all know who Ted Bundy is. Infamous serial killer based in Washington, which is where I live. I rated this book a 3.75, which honestly it's higher than I thought I would. So this book is from the perspective of Ted Bundy's long-term girlfriend. They dated for a long time. I can't remember exactly because I read this book in November of last year, but it had to be like 5 to 8 years. And even during his trial, they were like kind of together. Anyway, it was just interesting to see from the perspective of like somebody that actually knew him outside of murdering people, and how she like literally could not fathom that he was actually the one behind everything. She goes in depth about everything. Like there's photos in there of what was found in his car. There was like the letters that he wrote from prison to her, like a lot of manipulative things, not even involving him being like a serial killer before she even like knew about any of this, before the public even knew about any of this. Moments between their relationship that really blew my mind as to why they were together and why she put up with him. That being said, it was definitely a dark read, gave me chills, was super interesting, but I didn't want to rate it much higher. I totally forgot that I read this book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. How did I forget this book? On my channel, like a long time ago, I talked about how I was reading the Hunger Games books for the first time ever. Like I had seen the movies, but I had never read the books. Well, I started reading the books last year, and I was waiting for my mom to be done with this one. Hey, I don't know if this will be a surprise to some people, but I rated this a 5 out of 5. Sorry, but like it was really good. I cried during the end of this book. I cried, and I didn't even cry at the freaking Song of Achilles book. And that was not what people said they'd cried at. Nobody said they cried at this, and I cried. I bawled my little eyes out. And as I listened to Olivia Rodrigo, this woman right here's song that went with the movie right after I finished the book, I cried even more. Because it really made me understand what the frick was happening in the end of this book. The ending was kind of a plot twist. I'm sure everyone already knows what happens by now. This book is great, way better than the movie, even though people are obsessed with the movie. I don't know why nobody's talking about the book. Now we're on to the current day books. That was all that I read last year that I had not talked to you guys about. As you can tell, it was not a lot. Okay, now actually getting into the books that I read this year in 2024. So the first book that I read this year, more of a reread, it was The Great Gatsby. I also tabbed this one. Why does this never want to focus, bro? I hate this camera sometimes. Yellow was hearts, light blue was writing, and dark blue was dark, like dark moments. I didn't do too much detail on this one because it was a reread and it's a really tiny book. So I rated this book a 3.75. It was good, but it wasn't great. Majority of the story is also once again about cheating. I don't understand why I was drawn to those kind of books. I just don't remember that being the biggest plot in this book or one of the bigger plots in this book. I'm not trying to diss on it. It's a really good book. It's a really good classic to jump into if you're just getting into classics. The writing really is beautiful. Some of the lines in this book like make me want to melt. So I get why somebody would really enjoy this book, but I don't think it's the best classic out there. Next up is the only graphic novel on this list, but I found this in one of the free little libraries in Ellensburg. It is Kiss number 8. I read this in one day. So this ended up only being a 3.0 though, because it's a graphic novel. It's really short. Okay, one of my most anticipated reads that I thought I would read last year and I didn't. The Stephen King book that I decided to read for my first ever Stephen King full book was Misery. I don't think it's that much of a surprise if you know anything about Stephen King. It's a smaller book. By smaller, I mean it's still over 300 pages. But I rated this 4.0, which is pretty decent, especially for my first King book. I feel like he's kind of hard to transition into because he has a little bit different of a writing style. There is some things that I don't love in his writing. He's also just such a classic novelist and so many people love him and rave about him. So why wouldn't I want to get into him? It's purely just like about this author who basically essentially gets kidnapped and is forced to write a book in his quote-unquote #1 fan's house, and she basically tortures him to write this book that he doesn't want to write, called Misery. Boom. It was so late in the day. It was a solid 4.0 once again, completely different from Misery, but worth a 4.0 in itself. The writing is so phenomenal in this. If you've never read Claire Keegan, I highly suggest it. It is very tiny, literally a little bit over 100 pages. Knocked it out in a day, in literally an hour. So it has short stories within this. They all have similar themes about similar things. Like this one was about breakups, I would say, or like divorces or cheating, like something around that. As of this year, I still have not talked about any 5 stars. The last book that we're gonna talk about is my first 5-star of the year. It was the best 5-star book I feel like I could start with. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I immediately gave it a 5 stars when I was rating it. If you're looking for an LGBTQ+ representation, this is the book you should be reading. This is the book that you should be reading. Basically, it's this like famous Hollywood artist that's like growing old and she's decided to write a memoir. So she has somebody sitting in with her every single day talking about her life and everything that's happened in her life. And obviously she's had 7 husbands, so each husband has their own like section of the book. I literally love everything about this book. I'm not even joking you when I said I cried. I cried every single goddamn time that I picked this book up. I literally cannot explain this without spoiling it, so I'm really not gonna say anything more. I will insert a photo of me reading this book. Oh, what? That was me? No, it wasn't. But I will take no shame in saying that I cried many, many, many times. Actually, physically, like heartache. I felt heartache when I read this, which I've never felt while reading a book. All I'm saying is you have to pick this up. You need to read this right now because holy, if you live another day without reading this, might as well consider that you're not even living. Let me know if you guys have read any of these and what your opinions are on them. I guess my biggest takeaway for you is read 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo if you haven't. Hands down, you will love it. And if you don't, sue me. Don't actually, because I don't have money. That's all I have to say. I don't know. Bye.